So I said, Manus, don't feel bad. We couldn't decide how the names would go. So we figured it out this way. We would flip a coin. If it came up heads, it was Sanders, Retzlaff, and Kraft. If it came up tails, it was Kraft. It was Retzlaff, Sanders, and Kraft. But it came up and landed on its edge. Then it was Kraft, Retzlaff, and Sanders. I was never late to a meeting after that.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for Focus Through the Generations. We're in a very unique time right now in our industry where we have 4 generations of actively practicing ophthalmologists. So wonderful to have this. And today with us, we have Dr. Manus Kraff. And some of the words that Dr. Manus Kraff has said to me in my lifetime that have stuck with me is, kid, if you find a job you'll love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I found the job I love. So I'm happy that I followed his advice. And Dr. Kraff, thank you for joining us this evening. And I want to give you time to introduce yourself. And you have a lot to tell us, Dr. Manus Kraff, about your life in ophthalmology. You just shared with me that you had 60 years in ophthalmology. So fill us in on where you started and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I guess I started in a small town on the Indian Reservation in the state of Washington, a little town called Toppenish, which is an Indian name that means onion. Strangely enough, the word Chicago also means onion, so I've never really left the onions. At any rate, I went to the University of Washington in Seattle to medical school, graduated. I came back to the Cook County Hospital in Chicago, did an internship there, did my residency in ophthalmology, and I finished in 1961. In those days, there was a doctor draft, but you could get deferred for your residency if you agreed to go into the service for 2 years afterwards, which I did. So in 1961, when I finished my residency, I went into the United States Navy, and I was stationed at the United States Naval Hospital in Great Lakes, Illinois. I spent 2 years there, and when I came out in 1963, I engaged in a practice with my future partner, who was Howard Lieberman. And that lasted for more than 30 years, and many, many fond memories. And basically, from 61 on, I was just an ophthalmologist in a busy private practice. And I did that until 1972. So I tell you, I had my greatest professional honor, one of my 2, when Venkataswamy came to Chicago for me to operate on his cataracts, which I did. And he could have had any of those fabulous ophthalmologists there. So that was maybe the finest personal honor I had in my career.
I did not know that.
When I was in New York, I'd ordered the 2nd generation phacoemulsification machine, and it came in April. It was delivered to the hospital that I worked at, and I scheduled my first case in the afternoon. I think it was a Tuesday afternoon. So we set everything up by the book, and it wouldn't work. The water wouldn't flow. I could not get the water flowing there. After 2 hours, somebody figured it out that inside the bottle is a regular rubber stopper that covers up the air that bleeds into it. When we pulled that off, then the water. So it took 2 hours to start the first case. The case took me another hour or 2, and it was like 4 hours doing one case, my first phaco on my own. So we all have great memories.
What brand of phaco was that?
There was only one at the time, and that was Cavitron. There was a little tiny one that we took to India with it, but it wasn't the big Cavitron like Charlie used with irrigation and aspiration. So this was we call it the blue monster because it had a blue face to it. And that was one of the very first one of those second generations that they delivered. When the first generation was run, you needed one or two technicians just to run the machine. So that changed a lot. So I took my first case in lens implantation in November in Long Beach, California, with with Henry Hirschman. And Henry was one of the wild early pioneers of phaco and lens implantation. This was the first course that they gave. And at that course, I met, who did I meet teaching in it? I met Ken Hoffer, who was just a young kid talking about lens implantation formulas. And Bob Sinsky was there, and that whole crew of California ophthalmologists that started ophthalmology, because they were the group that really pioneered it in 73 and 74 in Long Beach, California. And so I took the course, and then I still wasn't sure when I was going to start putting in lenses, but I knew I had to do it. So I made an arrangement to go to Holland, because in those days, the two leaders were Kees Binkhorst and Jan Vorst. So I remember I went with Dr. Lieberman and myself, and we took our accountant, Howard Feinstein. I don't remember if you knew Howard or not.
I know Howard, yeah.
And we went, we first went to Holland, to Amsterdam, okay? And we toured and we looked at Holland, and we met, before Amsterdam, we went up to Groningen, which is in northern Eastern Holland, where Jan Vorst lived and worked. And I remember watching him operate and then going practicing on his dining room table, putting in these iris supported lenses. And they were Binkhorst lenses, they were Vorst lenses, they were all iris supported. And Binkhorst had just come out with his two loop capsular supported lens. So I could tell you all sorts of stories about those lenses in those days. Then we went to where Binkhorst was from in Holland, and in his kitchen we also worked. And we came back from Holland and started doing implants. And they were all iris supported with these loops, et cetera, at first. And I met, all the pioneers were there. I remember going up to Port Huron, Michigan, and taking a course from Nick Duvis, and he had invented a rotor-rooter vitrector at that time, because there were no vitrectomy instruments. And who was my partner in the lab was somebody, I don't know if you will remember the name, is Steve Schering.
Yep.
And Steve Schering, nobody could get lenses then. And at that time, I had just shifted from a 4-loop Binkhorst lens, iris supported, to a medallion Vorst lens. So you had to beg, borrow, and steal to get lenses. And so I'd gotten these 50 4-loop lenses from one of the companies, and I didn't need them anymore. So I sold them. I sold those lenses, those 4-loop lenses, to Steve Schering. Steve Schering later became the father of the 2-loop lens. There was great debate on that in many suits, and what Steve Schering ended up doing, he cut off the 2 front loops and part of the back loops, and he made the first posterior chamber 2-loop lens. And they haven't changed too much since then, and that's 1975, 76. So, I was there when that was born, and it was in 77. I went to the Academy meeting, and I ran into a friend, John Sheets.
Yep.
And so at that time, I would fly all over the country just to watch these guys operate. So he lived in Texas, and he lived in West Texas. I'll think of the name of the town, in the oil capital of the world, where they make all the machinery. And what? Odessa, that's it.
Yeah.
Odessa. So I flew to Odessa. And so on the way, I stopped at Oklahoma City and I watched Jim Little operate. And that was a great story because Jim, we used to call him the John Wayne of ophthalmology. He was a big redheaded guy, kind of talked slowly, and he moved slowly, but he had the greatest pair of hands I ever saw in ophthalmology. To this day, I watched those hands operate, and I'd never seen everybody. Jim was the best. And at that time, there was anterior chamber lenses too, early in the game. So we were trying to figure out, and anterior chamber lenses came in 4 sizes: 11, 11 and a half, 12, and 12 and a half size. Remember those?
I do remember those.
Okay. So I said, I said to Jim, I says, Jim, you mean then you have to carry 4 different sizes of inventory to put these lenses? He said, no. He said, and remember, Jim would stop between each case, have a cigarette, and then go back to operate. But an unbelievable surgeon. So I said, no. He says, let me show you what I do. See the lens here? And there were those little choice lenses with this 4 haptics. What Jim had done, and I'll show you if I've got one here to show you. Anyway, what Jim had done, he had taken a little nail clipper, sterilized it, and then he only bought one size. He bought the big size, and he would clip off the ends just like you clip your nails, and then he'd sterilize it. They were rough. So I mean, you talk about being innovative and innovation. Jim would clip the 4 and say, well, he'd need a little smaller. It's a little too big. So I saw it with my own eyes. I mean, there's nothing like that today. There's nobody that innovative today.
No.
But amongst that, he's the greatest surgeon I've ever seen operate.
That's a good story. That's awesome.
So that was a story about early lens implantation, which I could go. I've been there through the extra cap. See, because the interesting thing at that time was the extra cap or the intracap. An interesting story about that. All of the new modern guys were doing extra cap, opening the lens to fake, and all the regular guys were doing intracap. And we used to have a little saying that the guys who are on more than wife number 1 were the extra cap guys, and all the guys who were still on their first wife were the intracap guys.
When did you get to the Srk formula? How long after all this did this?
Oh, that was very interesting because the formulas talk about lenses. First of all, we didn't have A scans. So when I started putting lenses in 75, A scans didn't come along till about 78 or 79. So how would we figure out what kind of power we'd put in the eye? So we'd ask, do you ever wear corrections? Do you ever wear glasses? Do you have an old pair of glasses to wear? Do you have your old prescription? Are you blind? When you're blind, you got any glasses for your parents? We're looking to get some kind of guesstimate. And I just got the A scan. And so I did one of these my history. I put it in. This is the first case I did on my first A scan. And the next patient comes in and the patient is -10. And so I said, well, that's the edema of the cornea. Comes back a week later and patient's -10. So I just had the thing for about a week and I hadn't used it yet, see? So I take that patient, I'd give it to my technician who's doing it. She's working away for about an hour trying to figure the thing out. She comes back, Dr. Kraff, there's something wrong. This said you should have put in a -11 lens. she was a very high myope, but I had no way of knowing it. She needed like a +3 or something, or a -3, something like that. And we put in a -10. She needed a -10. So she needed that glasses to overcorrect the empower lens. So that's when we knew there'd be better formulas coming out. The A scan was just coming out. And Jim Gills was working on a regression formula. And Don Sanders and I at the University of Illinois were working on a regression formula. And somebody that we didn't know, but named John Retzlaff out in Medford, Oregon, was also working, and they were starting to get these first couple of papers that were coming out. And John was a very, very smart guy from Harvard. And Don was a very, very smart guy. And there was me with these two smart guys. And so what I did is I supplied the patients, because I was the one that had this busy practice. And John was doing the mathematical formulas, and Don, who was not a surgeon, he was a researcher at the University of Illinois, he was calculating and doing with the formulas. So the academy was in Chicago that year, and you'd have to look back, 77, 78. And so the three of us decided we would meet at the academy and make plans to have a formula for the three of us: Sanders, Retzlaff, and Kraff. Well, at that time we didn't have any arrangements. Says we're going to meet at 9 o'clock at the academy before it starts. So it was down at McCormick Place, and I got there a half hour late. John and Don met without me because I was late. So I said, Manus, don't feel bad. We couldn't decide how the names would go. So we figured it out this way. We would flip a coin. If it came up heads, it was Sanders, Retzlaff, and Kraff. If it came up tails, it was Kraff. It was Retzlaff, Sanders, and Kraff. But it came up and landed on its edge, then it was Kraff, Retzlaff, and Sanders. I was never late to a meeting after that. That's how the name came. So so that's a little story with the SRK formula. And we still meet at the academy every year. This is 35, 40 years later since SRK. We have a few pictures of the three of us when we were younger, and a current picture.
Well, Dr. Kraff, let me ask you a question. Why did you choose to be an ophthalmologist?
That's a very interesting question. I was an intern at County Hospital. And at that time, as I told you previously, there was a doctor draft. And when you finished your internship, they drafted you in the service for 2 years. And you were just a regular doctor. But if you had been accepted for a residency, they would defer your going into the service until you finished your residency, and then they would take you. And it was called the Berry Plan. So I said, okay, I want to go in as a specialist. I don't want to go in as a general physician. Problem was I didn't know what I wanted to go into. So I was still an intern. So I started looking through internal medicine. At first, I thought when I graduated medical school, I wanted to go into general surgery or OB-GYN. Well, I knew after a month at County Hospital, I didn't want to do either one of those, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I started going through each one of the specialties, figuring out what would be good and what would be negative. And there'd always be something negative and always something positive. And when I got to ophthalmology, another intern that I knew was going into ophthalmology, I did not know one thing about ophthalmology. But consequently, there was nothing that I didn't like about ophthalmology. So I applied for a residency and I was accepted for it. So with that, I was deferred from my residency. So for 3 years, I did my residency with the basic science course, and then I went into the Navy. So that's how I got in, purely serendipitously.
That's interesting. I didn't know that story either. I thought I knew a lot about you. I want to ask you a question off of ophthalmology.
Yes.
And you're gonna have a tough time with this because you read a lot. What's your favorite book and why?
Oh boy, there are so many great books, absolutely great books that have been meaningful to me, and I'll never forget one that this isn't necessarily a favorite, but that had a meaning for me. And when I was in the Navy, I started reading a lot, because you had a lot of time between patients. Nobody killed themselves having 40 patients a day. If you had 10 in the morning and 10 in the afternoon, that was fine. So I bought a book called How to Develop a Superpower Memory by Harry Lorraine. And Harry Lorraine used to go around and perform these great feats of memory. So I read that book. And with that, I started, I started this intensive reading. Now I read about a book a week.
What is one? Gosh, I know you've got a ton, but tell me a story about a patient that sticks out in your mind the most, whether it's a funny story or a memorable story or whatever.
Well, there was a little girl. You always like to think you do something unusual. When I say there was a little girl, she was about 20 or 22. And she came to me because the the Polish doctor that worked for me said, Dr. Kraff, they have a Make-A-Wish Foundation, and she heard about you doing laser vision correction, and maybe you could come on and you might volunteer to do this for her. I said, sure, you know. So she came to the office. I haven't told you the interesting part about Anna. Her name was Anna. You can go on YouTube and look up Anna's Dream, where we put the video. What made Anna unusual? Anna she was myopic to a tune of about -3, -4. She didn't have any arms. She was born without arms. And Anna had so you can, when I sang stumps, there was nothing hanging down. Beautiful face, sweet girl in her early 20s, and she had a 2 or 3-year-old son.
Wow.
So I said, yes, we could do laser vision correction on her. And we did laser vision because she couldn't, obviously with no arms and hands, she couldn't put a contact lens. She was able to drive a car with her feet. She was amazing. Okay. And she could put her glasses on with her toes, So we did laser vision correction on her. We put that video on Facebook, so you can go to it, Anna's Dream, and see it. Amazing story. So that's one that just, of all the things I've done, that just kind of stands out as unusual. We've all been fortunate enough to do people that are absolutely blind, and when we take their cataracts out and put lenses in, they can see 20/20. And those are, fortunately, a lot of us have those experiences. I'm not alone in that. Many people, but this one with the armless young girl, it was amazing.
Dr. Kraft, I'm going to end with this. I have 2 questions I want to end with, but one, I want to ask you, what advice would you give right now to someone coming out of their residency and wanting to hang their hat somewhere?
Well, the problem is these young people getting out of their residencies today, it's much easier for us than it was for them. Because for us, we could go to a bank, borrow $50,000, outfit a complete office, hang up your shingle, so as to speak, and you had a practice in a year. People can't do that today for many reasons. The government is in there, all the insurances, there's not much patient pay. It's a different thing. So I think the most important thing is you mentioned it in the beginning. Pick out something you love to do. And today there's so many things. There's genetics, there's the pharmaceuticals with the eye. It's just these fields weren't even in existence then. Okay, so today just pick something you like and study that. And if you don't like it after you start a fellowship, leave it and do something else. But the main thing, pick something you can see yourself doing for the major part of your professional career.
And would you advise them to go solo or join a practice?
Well, you can't go solo anymore. It's just the economics of the situation. Unless you want to go to Timbuktu or maybe some state, you can't do it in the big city. You might be able to do it in a rural community in North or South Dakota or Montana or people where there aren't large populations. But where you have large populations, you just can't do it anymore.
Here's the last question I want to ask you though. We've asked everybody this question, and you're going to be able to answer this question probably better than anybody or give us a more thorough answer. You've given us a lot of it, but I just want to ask you, since you started in ophthalmology, what is the biggest impact of technology, or how has technology transitioned in your career, and where do you see it going in the next 10 years?
Okay, well, I'll tell you, I always feel I lived through the golden age of technology. The golden age has been nothing like this before, and I don't think there ever will be. When I came out in ophthalmology, people wore big, thick cataract glasses after they had their lenses taken out. They were taken out, you admitted to the hospital a day before, you did that, and then you kept it in the hospital, usually for the rest of the week before they left, and they could go with a pair of very thick glasses that cut down on your sight vision. That's gone now. We can now do a small incision surgery. They get off the table in 45 minutes and they can go home, and they can either see immediately or by the next day. So that's a major change.
Yep.
And the other major change, where we're reshaping the cornea so people didn't have to wear glasses and contact lenses. And that's a major thing, Polly. I mean, those things, there won't be, I can't, if there's a next revolution in ophthalmology, it'll be on the genetic level. It will not be in the mechanical level. Right now, we're still doing mechanical things, but that'll stop. We're doing mechanical things in retina, mechanical things in glaucoma, mechanical things in cataract and cornea. The next phase is going to be on a molecular level. So if I were to go out today, I think that's what my studying would be. That will certainly keep me interested for many, many, many years.
It's amazing. Your career in ophthalmology has led so many people, and you've taught so many people, not just about ophthalmology, but you've also taught them about life and choices and consequences of choices and opportunities and how to grab those. I'm one of those recipients of all those things from you. And I know lots of other people are. So I want to thank you for being with me today and for the things that you do for ophthalmology and for people. And you're amazing to me. And these stories, I'm sure no one has heard these stories. These are going to be awesome stories for people.
You already got a piece of them today, Polly.
Well,
we can do it at episode 2 or something.
Oh, we will, because I really want to go back and explore a lot of the stories that you have and be able to put these together, because I think they're beautiful stories, and I think that they're stories that people will learn from, but also they're funny stories. I mean, they're stories that bring life to ophthalmology, bring personal to ophthalmology, personality, which, you know, a lot of people don't think ophthalmologists have a personality, but you do. And so I think it's going to be a good series. And so you have no idea how much I love having you and knowing that you do that for me. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I call you my friend, my very good friend.